Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamoke Hinton-Hodge, and I'm the Vice President of Oakland Unified School District Board of Education. Excited and a little sobered to be here today, but very happy that we're doing this work. And so just want to welcome everyone to hear the work of Urban Strategies Council, the African American Male Achievement Office, and the work of so many other staff members, Barbara McClung, and really looking forward to us uncovering this work and really looking at a direction for our district and for our community to really serve African American male children within our district. So now, the best superintendent in the nation, Tony Smith.
Thank you, Vice President Hinton-Hodge. And I would say, coming to Oakland Unified as a superintendent, I was really invited to take this work on by Director Hinton-Hodge, named explicitly that we needed to step up, be explicit about issues of structural racism and how we would take that on as a system, and specifically issues that were plaguing West Oakland. And so kind of right out of the gate, so I want to appreciate you here today. And you know, the work that we're taking on, talking about disproportionality, overrepresentation of African American males in many of the negative categories is not new. And there's been work in Oakland before, and this is work that's been national. However, we have actually redesigned the entire organization to take on this issue. From a couple of years ago, starting the Office of African American Male Achievement, really naming that if we didn't target our resources in the area of greatest need, we wouldn't see a transformation in these outcomes. Taking a really strong approach that we're creating new opportunity structures in Oakland, but the thing that people often talk about is that this is a school issue. I think it's essential that we talk about this as an American issue. We have a deep structural divide in the United States, and we have structured our systems where African American children, particularly African American males, are way outside the sphere of success. And we have not done what's necessary to create the conditions and opportunities for our young African American males to experience success, be well cared for, well known, and expected much of. And we've really tried to take that work on here in Oakland, where I just want to say a couple of things about the conditions that many of our young African American boys are living in. Specifically, an African American child born in West Oakland is 1.5 times more likely to be born premature, 7 times more likely to be born into poverty, 2.5 times more likely to be behind in vaccinations, 4 times less likely to read at grade level by grade 4, and is likely to live in a neighborhood with 2 times the concentration of liquor stores and fast food restaurants. They're more than 5.5 times more likely to be pushed out of school than their white counterpart living only 2 miles away. That's in the city of Oakland. That's right here, right now, today. So we've tried to figure out how can we rethink the role of the Oakland Unified School District as the primary public institution responsible for the well-being of children to become an opportunity structure to create a healthier Oakland. Really healthy kids, I think, will result in a healthy Oakland. And unless we pay specific attention to the needs of African American males while we do that work, I don't think we're going to be successful. So it's been an extraordinary pleasure to work with Junius Williams, who is the Executive Director of the Urban Strategies Council, an educator in his own right, somebody who has been a champion for community, but specifically focused on the needs and caring for and creating data sets to make actionable real work on behalf of African American children. So Junius took on this charge of doing research in partnership to really look at what's going on for African American males in Oakland Unified right now, so we could take more informed action. And I did want to say, for me, a couple of shout outs. Ron Walker, who's the Executive Director of the Coalition of Schools Educating Boys of Color, has been a long-term mentor and guide, and was really helpful for me starting when I was saying, hey, we got to take this serious in Oakland. It's like, name it, go after it. And then now Larry Leverett, who is the Executive Director of the Panasonic Foundation, they've entered into a 10-year partnership with us, and their mission is to explicitly break the link between race and class and educational attainment. We believe deeply that while the demographics are predictive of outcome, they don't define or determine. So we've taken responsibility for creating a new set of conditions, doing new work to interrupt these long-term patterns. So Junius is going to talk about some of that data, and we're going to talk more deeply about the work that Chris Chapman has taken on as the Executive Director for African American Male Achievement. Barb McClung is going to share some of the structural pieces about how we care for and have changed not only the way we're doing discipline, but talking about creating a culture of well-being and really repairing relationships rather than just punishment. And obviously, this is all about increasing the knowledge and capacity of our young people. And our Deputy Superintendent is going to take on the content and talk about how we're really elevating literacy in particular, so that all these wraparound services, naming this explicitly, is so that our young boys of color, particularly African American men, are well prepared to contribute to a healthy future and a healthy Oakland, and they are truly assets and part of the positive narrative of our future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Junius. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I want to start by, excuse me, by just giving a little background on the partnership that was formed. Back in October of 2010, we entered at Urban Strategies Council a partnership with the Oakland Unified School District and the East Bay Community Foundation and launched the African American Male Achievement Initiative, which is an ambitious 6-year effort designed to dramatically improve the academic and life outcomes of African American males in Oakland Unified School District. The initiative is privately funded and is really targeting 7 goal areas, including academic achievement, graduation rates, literacy, suspensions, attendance, middle school holding power, and juvenile detention. In September of 2011, Partners in School Innovation joined that partnership, bringing their expertise in raising student achievement through whole school change processes. I want to start out by just acknowledging what may be the most noteworthy aspect of this press conference, and that is that this represents and is a result of the Board of Education and the Superintendent's recognition that there is a significant problem, and its proactive efforts to create the Office of African American Male Achievement, to partner with community in understanding not only the problems, but what solutions can be brought to bear to cure those problems, and a commitment to engage in the work of systematic change to improve outcomes for African American males, and in doing so, to learn how to better address the needs of all its varied student populations, and to make equity a reality throughout the district and for all of the students in the district. As the superintendent indicated, our role has been primarily one of contributing research and information to the efforts of the school district. Last week, we released 4 reports, and I just want to briefly describe those 4 reports. The first report, which didn't and hasn't gotten as much attention, but in some respects may be the most important of the 4, is a report that established baseline data on those 7 goal areas, identified the measurements and the targets that the district and the community will attempt to achieve over the next 6 years. So we have baseline data, longitudinal trend data on all 7 of those goal areas. And that's important because it sets the context for both the school district and the community to hold ourselves accountable for not just talking about the problem this time, but actually to produce some results for African American boys. So that report is available on the website and provides the detail on what the district and the community will attempt to achieve. The second report is called On Course to Graduate, and essentially what we did was to take what we already know about correlates of kids graduating or dropping out of school, and to take those measures and apply them to the African American student population. We found in our research that factors such as attendance, suspensions, academic performance, and grade retention correlate highly with kids either completing high school or dropping out. We then took those data and applied them to the African American student population. And just in short form, what we found that 45% of African American students in the district were on course to graduate, while 21% were at risk of being off course, and 34% were clearly off course at this time. That compares to 63% of all students in OUSD being on course, 18% at risk, and 20% off course. As is the case with each of the reports, we not only detail the data, but we make a series of recommendations to the school district and the community about ways to intervene in that problem. The second report, and because one of the factors related to retention of students is suspensions, we did a thorough examination of suspensions. And it started with a data analysis, and just in short form, district-wide, African American males are 6 times more likely to experience suspension in this district when compared to white students. They constitute about 17% of the student population, but account for about 42% of the suspensions. I won't go through all of the detailed statistics, but it's a grim picture of what kids face in terms of, at the same time we're trying to attract them to school, on the other hand, we're pushing them out by our disciplinary practices. Especially implicated in the suspension, and I want to highlight it, is the offense of defiance of authority or disruption, accounting for about 38% of all the suspensions for African American males in this school district, and in considerable need of some attention and direction to staff about how we deal with young people around issues of authority. We did a really detailed policy analysis, including looking at state ed code, local Board of Education policy, collective bargaining contracts, to try to understand what policy levers there may be for correcting this pattern. We also, again, have a detailed set of recommendations that we offered the school district around ways in which we can intervene in the suspension problem. And then finally, attendance. And not truancy, as most of us are accustomed to talking about, but it's really a concept of chronic absence. When kids miss 10% or more of the scheduled school days, there's pretty good data to indicate it impacts their academic achievement. When we looked at those data, about a quarter, or about 20% of the African American males in this school district are chronically absent, which means that they're at further risk of not being able to partake the instructional program. Especially noteworthy is the high level of chronic absence in kindergarten, first and second grade for African American males, which parallels their level of chronic absence at the high school level. And one doesn't have to be an instructional genius to figure out in those formative years, if kids are missing that much, they're not getting the basic building blocks of literacy and being able to achieve that milestone of reading at grade level by 3rd grade. Again, we provide some recommendations and policy analysis. So those are the reports. They lay out a pretty good framework for beginning to attack some of the problems that most impact African American males and their opportunities for success within the school district. I want to conclude by just inviting you to join us on a series of webinars that we'll be conducting with the school district beginning tomorrow, where we'll do an overview of the 4 reports, and then in succession we will do specialized webinars on suspension, attendance, and graduation. I want to conclude by just thanking the superintendent, the Board of Education, the staff for cooperating. This was not a got you sort of effort. This really reflects a partnership and everyone's commitment to bringing to bear all the resources that we have available in Oakland to attack this problem and be successful for African American boys, their families, and the entire community of Oakland. Thank you.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Chris Chapman. I'm the Executive Director of African American Male Achievement. I took on this position October 1st, 2010, and in the first year of the work, prior to the reports that just were released, we realized that there was definitely a crisis happening or going on in our community, hence forth the creation of this department. Last year, a lot of our work really was doing an audit of best practices within Oakland Unified School District, as well as looking at some of the leading schools in the nation that were producing excellent educational outcomes for African American males. And one of the things that we found out that was something that had a direct impact on meeting the needs of African American males as it relates to excellent attendance rates, excellent achievement rates, decreased disciplinary issues, were schools that had manhood development classes or classes that identified cohorts of African American males and identified an African American man from the community that was trained either in a youth development prime or a social emotional curriculum that was working with the boys Monday through Friday. So that was one of the things that we found. Those boys that were producing high educational outcomes actually were a part of these kind of cohorts. The second thing was we identified that boys in those classes during the school day compared to after school actually had even greater positive results. So last year, we hit the ground running, came on October 1st. We started a pilot initiative called Manhood Development Program at our 3 major high schools, which pretty much was the second semester of last year, where we identified a group of African American males, about 25 black boys, at Skyline High School, at Oakland Technical High School, and Oakland High School. And what we found, just by identifying a brother from the community trained in a social emotional curriculum that was working with our young brothers Monday through Friday during the school day, that attendance rates went up, that incidents of disciplinary issues within the school day went down, and actually we saw that their grade point average went up. So we scaled that up this year, and also that strategy was embedded in the strategic plan. And so now we're at 5 high schools this year, and we're at 1 middle school, and there's a 2 other middle schools that are under the auspices of what we're doing, but didn't get all of the supports or treatments that we're providing. With that being said, though, it's been amazing what we've been able to do this school year, working with African American male students during the school day, and in one instance after an after-school program. And so one of the nuances that we found with working with our young brothers after school was we had a brother by the name of Jahi, who's working with middle school boys at Edna Brewer Middle School that did transformational work, not just Monday through Friday working with the boys in the class, but they also spearheaded and facilitated 3 African American family summits where the boys, along with Brother Jahi in our department, actually looked at how do you change school culture and identify values that we all can begin to practice as a school body. And so not only were we doing the manhood development classes, we began an initiative called the African American Male Achievement Cohort Group, which we're going to scale out to 8 schools next year. But we piloted this year at Edna Brewer Middle School. And really what we identified was in the middle school culture was that street culture is stronger than school culture. But if we could begin to work with our young brothers to put a campaign within their school community to lift up, it's cool to be smart, it's all right to have books in your backpack and to hold each other accountable and to kind of counter the street pulls and issues, that it actually can have a ripple effect throughout the school culture. And at Edna Brewer Middle School, with the 3 African American Family Summits and we did 2 Saturday school convenings where a group of students and parents and teachers and classified staff came together to identify something that was going to change school culture, and they landed on the creation of a Black Student Union. And so we're going to look to work with schools next year, 8 schools, around identifying a core group of goals and a set of values that a school will work together in service of African American males. So those are 2 things that we're doing this year, the manhood development class, as well as the African American Male Achievement cohorts, the voluntary school study team, to really kind of transform school culture to hold African American males at the highest level, improve the expectations for African American males, and really just kind of getting everybody on the same accord as it relates to meeting the needs of black boys. Next, I would like to invite everybody to come out to a community action forum on Tuesday, June 19th from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, where we're going to have Junius and his team share a little bit more about the reports. We're going to share some of the things that we've been doing this year and really try to make it a call to action. So for folks in the community to come on out and work with our department, work with the school district on how we improve the educational outcomes for African American males. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Barbara McClung, and I oversee all of the behavioral health initiatives for the district. And what I'd like to add to the conversation today is some work that we're doing to interrupt the disproportionate suspension of African American students. And it's interesting, I was in a training this morning with 8 of our schools that have high disproportionality, and where we're focusing on an initiative that's called Positive Behavioral Intervention and Support, or PBIS. And this is a national best practice. We actually learned about it from the Office of Civil Rights, because it was considered to be an intervention that helped to bring equity to school sites across all contexts within the school around discipline. And one of the things that I was asked to speak about today are what are some of the triggers for students that result in behavior that results in suspensions. And one of the things that students tell us, and we have pretty good data through the California Healthy Kids survey, and then we have more anecdotal data from our school sites. But one of the things that students tell us is that they feel that in many cases there is a bias that is applied to them in terms of discipline. And when we look at our numbers, we actually see that that this appears to be true. And the result of that is both for the students and for their families that they become more and more disengaged and displeased with our education system. So, for example, in the past, and some of our even some of our school board members have said to us, there is a place for tough love. When my father told me to stop behaving in a certain way or this consequence would happen, I did that, and or I faced the consequence. So I think that's part of our theory about suspension that is prevalent in the public education system right now, that if we suspend kids, they'll go home, their parents will say, hey, you need to do whatever that school is telling you to do, get it together, and then they'll come back more prepared to meet the behavioral expectations of the school. However, if there's an implied bias, that's not what happens, actually. Students go home. The student feels that they have been unfairly disciplined. The parent feels that the student has been unfairly disciplined. And the student comes back actually less prepared to engage in school because they feel actually that they are not as welcome as another student. And so coming back to the initiatives that we're focused on, the initiative of positive behavioral intervention and support is really designed to create to clarify what the behavioral expectations or the values, as Mr. Chapman was speaking about. What are the values of this school site, as selected by this school site, that we're all in agreement with? And how do we apply those fairly to all students in all contexts? So that it's not that Mr. X is really fine about me having a hat on, whereas Miss Y sends me out of class and I get sent home for a uniform violation. But that the expectations are clear across all contexts, and we shift our focus from punishment actually to relationship building and positive reinforcement. Within that, I'd like to speak briefly about another initiative that we're piloting, and we've had some very good data to date with this, which is restorative justice. And restorative justice is a wonderful complement to providing behavioral support. Restorative justice is a shift in paradigm from looking at suspendable behavior as from a criminal perspective that says what was the harm that was done and what should the punishment be. We're interested in what was the harm that was done and what should the reparation be. And how do we support students to repair harm, behavior that for example, disrupts the classroom? How do we support students to do that so that, in fact, they build social capital through our intervention, as opposed to become further marginalized? And we've had a lot of good feedback from parents. We've been implementing this in about 12 schools. And as an alternative to suspension, we hold what's called a family group conference. And in that setting, everybody, we have people in a circle. We try to sort of eliminate the sense of hierarchy so that everybody has the opportunity to speak and to participate in the solution. And the feedback from parents is that they feel very engaged, and in fact, they feel that their child is being cared about. And that's ultimately what our goal is we're trying to shift our host environment to be a caring community that meets the needs of our students. And right now, I think that's one of our biggest challenges, is how do we adopt our environment, our host environment, which for some cases is a real mismatch for the needs of some of our students. How do we shift that? And I would like to, in closing, just really applaud our superintendent who, having embraced the full service community schools model, has moved us forward in terms of thinking about our systemic problems, as opposed to focusing on the child as the problem. How can we shift our institution to be more in line with meeting the needs of the whole child? And as I said, we have some good outcome data. We have an evaluation from the Henderson Center at UC Berkeley that can be found on our district website under Restorative Justice that indicates that after a 3-year implementation, suspension rates were down 85%. There were zero expulsions, and 100% teacher retention, which is extremely meaningful in terms of having ongoing relationships, supportive relationships with students. So. With that, I'd like to thank you and pass it on to our next speaker.
Welcome. My name is Maria Santos, and I am the Deputy Superintendent in charge of Instruction, Leadership, and Equity in Action. And I want to talk a little bit about the work we have been doing in the academic area. As we reviewed the data, and data is critical to inform our work, one of the key things that we found last year was that significant numbers of students were reading significantly below grade level. And this particular acknowledgement of where our students are came out of work from the diverse communities focusing in on what we call Focal 15, a strategy to really look closely at students that are outside of the sphere of success. And what is it that these students need to be successful? One of the key findings out of this work was that our community started to request a way in which to really understand more deeply where students are as it relates to reading. And so this year we instituted a universal reading screening tool for our community so that each and every teacher had the opportunity to understand where each child is as it relates to their reading proficiency, key to their work in academics. One of the key things that we know is that if students are not successful and are not reading at grade level, it is very difficult for them to engage in grade level courses and actually to access the kind of resources that are going to make them literate, that are going to build their problem-solving skills, that are going to afford them the opportunities to fully engage in the schooling experience. Many of our students that do not read at grade level have coping mechanisms that they use during the elementary grades. But as soon as they hit the secondary levels, those coping mechanisms do not function for them anymore. And then they start to experience significant failure, disengagement from school, and eventually leave our school communities. So getting at the literacy skills early on is critical for the system, not only at building the capacity in the K-1-2s, but if we have students that are not reading at grade level, what kinds of interventions and strategic interventions do we put in place for each and every child to accelerate the kinds of reading proficiencies that they need to be successful? So this year we have provided to the schools opportunities to not only engage their teachers in capacity development to learn how to teach reading at multiple levels, but also to take advantage of technology-mediated resources that look at where students are and build supports for them in developing their reading skills. And so we've put that in place for our elementary, middle, and high schools. In addition, we need to pay attention to what's going on with our secondary students. And so to support secondary students that were reading 4 grade levels below grade level, we've instituted strategic reading classes. Those classes are supported by a teacher that has developed their capacity to become a reading specialist for adolescents, bringing the kind of reading resources and tools to the classroom that are highly motivating for students, but also dealing with their specific skills and helping them build the tools that they need to become effective readers. We've been able to put that in place in 14 of our secondary schools and have found that this particular intervention has had significant impact on accelerating the reading levels of students. Within the first semester, we saw African American males move in reading level beyond a grade level, which is significant as it relates to movement within a year. And certainly we're looking, as we do this work, to accelerate students so that they are proficient and advanced readers. Other interventions in this area include looking at our resources and our work in the area of mathematics, as well as building strong opportunities for all students within our system, making STEM a reality for all of our students, and building aspirations in our community to engage in the materials in the subject area that are going to provide powerful career opportunities for our community, and making that available to each and every student with particular attention to our African American community, and creating within our community corridors, communities that build that practice, that engagement with exploratory learning, with critical thinking, so that students start early on understanding what's available, what kinds of jobs are available in the field, and start building aspirations for that along with parents and community. We are looking at a variety of strategies, testing them, and then disseminating them throughout the system. We have much more to do and look forward to growing quality practices throughout our system. I would like to now introduce Elia Bustamante, principal at United for Success, who has joined us to talk a little bit about what the experience looks like at the school site.
Good afternoon once again. My name is Elia Bustamante, and I'm the principal at United for Success Academy. Today I want to share with you a little bit about our success, but really focus on what has led us to get the results that we've received. So a few years ago, a lot of different families, parents, staff, students would come and share anecdotal data as far as how they were experiencing our school site, how they were experiencing discipline, how they were experiencing our systems and structures. And so we had several of our parents say, what's the point of suspension? All the child's going to do is come home to me, and they're going to have a day off. Why not have some alternative? Can they do community service? Can you do in-house and have somebody talk to them? Can you offer them counseling? And all the time, I believe we knew that that's what needed to happen, something different. So we've had the data all along, and we've had the different voices telling us this isn't right. And I think if we had taken some time to really reflect on our own practice and really think about what exactly are we doing, we may have come to that realization sooner that some changes needed to happen. I want to share with you all a process that we engaged our staff in. So in the spring of last year, our instructional leadership team decided that every single staff member in our building believed that we were doing what was best for kids, but we didn't have a common definition of what is that. We didn't have agreements as far as what is it that we're here for as a school. And I share that with you because I believe that the success we've had has to do with the alignment that we have with OUSD's 5-year strategic plan, and it wasn't intentional. What I mean by that is that people who come into education come in it for the good reasons, and somehow we lose track of what it is that we came to do. What is our core vision? What's our core values in doing some of the work that we set out to do? And so we engaged our staff first as far as what is our purpose of United for Success, and we landed on, at United for Success Academy, if we look at our data and we look at who we're serving, we really need to interrupt the inequities that exist in our community. And we need to interrupt them in ways that interrupt academically and also socially, because we want to make sure that our kids are successful for high school, but also beyond. And when we started to think about that, we had to really take a look at not only ourselves individually, but also as a collective. What do we mean by inequities? What are the structures and systems that are in place in our own building? Not externalize it and not say, well, if only the state would do this, or if only federal government would do this, but really look at what do we have in our control at our site level to make some of those changes. If we're really about this, what are we going to have to do? And so restorative justice was something that we had been talking about and kind of implementing for the past few years. But this year was the year that after we had a conversation with our whole staff about what do we mean by interrupting inequities, and if this is our mission, then we really have to prioritize this. And that's where I think by no coincidence, through dialogue and conversations with our staff and with our families, we actually implemented some of the recommendations that are in the Urban Strategies report, which was eliminating the defiance disruption. I take that back. We haven't 100% eliminated that. I think one of the biggest steps we need to do in order to make the change is to be 100% honest with ourselves, and that's one thing that we're doing. So we are still making mistakes, but we definitely have made a commitment to not suspend as much as humanly possible when it comes to that. And because the way the Ed code and the suspension paperwork is written is 2 interventions prior to. That means if a kid has not followed my directions once, and I call the parent and I told them, the second time, and I called them and I told them, by the 3rd time, I have the quote-unquote right to suspend the child. And when you think about it, you realize I have the right to, but it doesn't make it right. And so those are the really hard conversations that I think you have with staff. I'm sorry, I get really emotional. But you have with staff, but you also have with yourself. That you make these decisions based on what you think is, we make some decisions that we aren't necessarily basing on what's right for kids, what's convenient for us. And unfortunately, I feel that the inequities that we are beginning to tackle as a system, as an institution, as OUSD, has a lot to do with that, is that we need to start making decisions based on what's right by kids. And I know that at United for Success Academy, we're not perfect. We've got plenty of work to do, but we've begun to tackle the gap in education, in intervention. So reading has become a focus for our students who are struggling reading and writing. Basic math skills that they're absolutely going to need in order to be successful and ready for algebra. The suspension data is the one where we've had the highest success rate this year, and that's where we've seen a reduction in suspensions, period, but also a 72% reduction in our African American suspensions of African American students. And again, that comes with just, we're not going to suspend for disrupting defiance, valid authority, or anything that quote unquote requires 2 interventions prior to. We are currently suspending for fighting, drug use, and any kind of weapons, but we are also, when we reintegrate our students into our school, we're engaging in the process of what was the harm, and what can you learn from the harm, and how do you make it right? So it's not just you're suspended, now you go back to class like nothing happened. It's you were suspended at this point, that we're welcoming you back, we're engaging the child in a process, and the family, because when you suspend them, you're also hurting their relationship with the family. And we still have a long way to go because the bias that Barb spoke of is historical, and it's been there, and it was real. And so now how do we change that? But I just wanted to kind of share our journey and note and recognize that we still have a long way to go, but at the same time that it is important to celebrate some of the successes that we're having as we move along, and that I think it really is going to take us to be really honest with ourselves in order to make the changes.
So thank you very much. And I did want to recognize Ellie's leadership. I mean, it takes somebody who is completely committed to kids to coach and hold adults in a place where they can change the culture. And her honesty and leadership has been extraordinary. And those are real changed outcomes for kids. And they've taken it on as a system inside the school, not individual classrooms. And really, as we talk about the kind of system we have to create in Oakland, we have to create a very different system that connects with housing, with economy, workforce. We have to transform all kinds of outcomes. So this is deeply a school district issue about how we're supporting African American boys to be more successful, but it truly is an Oakland responsibility, and we need to take this on together. We're going to now show a series of videos and kind of then open it up to questions.
The adults that are in service of our children have to be open to, how can we get better at understanding the developmental needs of our children? How can I get better in understanding the cultural needs and the nuances of where our children come from?
What generally happens with students who receive multiple suspensions is that they receive additional suspensions. And the result is, one, that they're out of school, but second, that they begin to become disengaged with the school setting, and as do the parents. They begin to feel that there is a bias against them, at times a racial bias, and they begin to disengage with and actually become disenchanted with education in general. And this is caused by being pushed out of the classroom repeatedly.
So zero tolerance was what we had been told, we had been sold on that, and when we really stopped and reflected on what do we believe in, we realized that that's not what we believed in. And when we were introduced to the concepts of restorative justice, we identified that that was something that we as a school wanted to take on.
We identified that there's a trend that crosses all of those domains, and that is that for our African American students, they experience disproportionate rates of suspension, referral, and also incarceration. And so we believe that this particular group is not receiving an equitable education in comparison to other ethnic and racial groups in the district. And so we have dedicated and organized our services to bring equity for all students in OUSD.
In this room, for example, we're now the Restorative Justice Room in United. There used to be a classroom full of, of students here that were in some kind of detention. And they would be here all day and not say a word. Nobody would talk to them, and they would just be here, wasting their time. And
our entire mission for existing here at United for Success is to interrupt the inequities that exist in our communities by ensuring that all of our students are academically and socially prepared for success in high school.
So one of the things that we're doing is really looking at data across the district to align our limited resources to the sites where it's most needed. And we do see some sites where there are significant disproportionality in terms of the referrals to special ed and the suspensions, where additional district resources may not yet have been aligned.
So in OUSD, we've looked very carefully at best practices, national best practices for reducing racially disproportionate suspensions. And we've identified a couple of strategies that appear to be particularly advantageous, particularly for African American students. One of them is restorative justice. And restorative justice is a paradigm shift that changes our approach to discipline from identifying what rule was broken and what punishment should be given to what harm was caused, and what reparation can we support the student to make so that they actually are more engaged in school after an incident than they would be by being pushed out.
Some of the most promising practices that we as a district are putting forward to address the needs of black boys and decrease suspension rates, I'll kind of speak severalfold. One of which I'll speak back to again is the importance of the manhood development classes. I mean, I think that's something that, when it has an immediate impact. You get a positive African-American man from the community that's trained in a socio-emotional curriculum that has a structure in class and allow them to work with 25 African-American males, the impact on that kind of process alone, just in the first semester, at our 6 schools that we rolled this out, semester 1, we saw an impact in attendance rates of those boys in that cohort compared to the black boys that weren't receiving that treatment. We saw an impact in decrease in incidents of discipline, again, with the boys that were taking the class compared to those that weren't. And then we saw improvement in grade point average.
When you look at our suspension data in comparison from last year to this year, we have drastically reduced the number of, not only of number of days that students are missing, but also the number of offenses for which students are being suspended. Last year, for example, the number of days kids missed as a result of suspension was about over 350. And this year we're looking at about 180.
We're also looking at using this framework of response to intervention to support the sites where there is the greatest impact with aligning the resources they have. So an example of that would be looking at a site where they have the Restorative Justice program, where they have PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention Systems, where they have a secondary reading specialist, where they have full-service community school partnerships resources in their after-school programs, and assisting the site with aligning all of those resources targeted to particular students.
We've definitely seen an increase of students coming to different adults on campus asking for help and I need to resolve this conflict, as opposed to taking it out in a violent way or setting up fights. So you definitely see a sense of an increase of students taking ownership of the school.